Hey guys, my name is Haley and today we're going to be filming what I'm going to call my fall book recommendations. My hair is already falling out, that's great. I did try a different angle to see if I liked it so you could see more of the decor on the shelves. Also, this is one of my new little friends, and that one that I got at a fall festival that we went to yesterday at Black Cat, and I'm so excited about them, so I wanted to show all of the things off as well as all of my little lights. Oh, you can't see the mushroom light. We have to fix that better. But yeah, today we're going to be filming some fall recommendations. This one is not specific to horror because I know there are some people that probably are finding this that don't like horror. And as someone who reads a lot of horror, most of my recommendations are usually horror. So I tried to pick ones that were not. I even threw in some dark romance and some contemporaries that are set in the fall. So we're gonna jump right into it and let's go. The first recommendation I have is You Again by Kate Goldbeck. I read this last year. I think it was last year. And it was on one of my favorite books of the year lists. And this is a contemporary that is, what's the movie it's always compared to? It's a Tom Hanks movie, I think. It's one of those really popular rom-coms that is not coming to my brain right now. But this is set over the course of like a million years. Like how many years is it? I want to say it's set over like 8 years or so, and it is these two people who meet in a crazy random happenstance of like the guy is dating her roommate at one point, and they like for the first couple of years and first times they meet each other they hate each other, and then they become friends, and then it evolves into something more. If you liked One Day in December, highly recommend this. This is the fall version of that. It's also like the most fall cover you've ever seen in your entire life, and I highly recommend it for the season, especially if you're looking for fall-centric contemporaries. Next up is a very popular read, and that is The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. This is my favorite of Ashley Poston's. I've read her other book. I have not read the new one that just came out, but this is the story of a girl who works for a book company, a bookish firm, and in this book she meets this man. They have a weird start, and then she goes to, is it her hometown? Yeah, I believe it's her hometown, and she goes there and she runs into this man, and he is a ghost, and it is her trying to solve what happened with him. But it is often pitched as a romance with a ghost, and the stress of how that's ever going to work out with an HEA in the end. I love this. This is one of my favorite romances of all time. I love a good paranormal twist, and I feel like Ashley Poston does that so well, so highly recommend this one for the fall. Next up is a book I never hear anything about, and to be fair, I will preface this by saying this series was never finished. I think there was at least supposed to be a fourth book, and then her rights got seized, and I don't think the last book ever came out, and I'm still very upset about it. But that is The Name of the Star by Maureen Johnson. This might be my favorite paranormal series, like paranormal romance series. It definitely was years ago when I read it. And if you liked The Dead Romantics especially, I highly, highly recommend this one. I also, if anybody who has read this wants a queer version of it, I really recommend the Dead Serious series. So, small plug for that. But this is about people who are, she arrives in London and there are killings going on that are very reminiscent of Jack the Ripper. And it is about her discovering she might have some abilities she didn't know that she had, and it involves being able to see ghosts with this murder mystery going on in the background. There are 3 books out. I own all 3 of them, and I hope to God someday that the 4th book comes out. This is the same author as the Truly Devious series, which, if you've seen this cover floating about, I also read this. I do recommend it. It's just not my favorite of Maureen Johnson's, so if you enjoy that series, please read her other series, but be warned that it is not finished because her rights have been seized. And I hope that that gets resolved eventually because I need the conclusion to this series and would love to have an excuse to reread it. Next up is a more recent read of mine, and that is One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. This is a story that it is a fantasy world in which the magic is contained within tarot cards, and the only way to stop this mist from descending on the town is to unite the entire deck of tarot cards, which is not something that has been done in hundreds of years. And if they don't get rid of the mist, then people are going to continuously be eaten up by it, because if you touch the mist, you go crazy and disappear into the woods. And then the preface of this book in particular is this girl has this creature in her head that she calls the Nightmare, And she discovers that it is tied to the tarot cards and the fact that she cannot touch the tarot cards or she will absorb them. It is about her teaming up with a bunch of people from the castle to try to get rid of this curse. And again, this is a more recent read of mine, and I gave this 4.5 stars. This is a great duology if you don't want to get into a full series and you are more of a romantasy person. I feel like you will probably enjoy this. There's a main romance in this book, and then there is a different romance with some side characters in the second book, and I've been told, I don't know if I agree with this, but I've been told people who didn't like the romance in the first book will like the romance in the second book. I liked the romance in both books, so maybe I'm the oddball out here, but I highly recommend this for spooky season. And I also feel like it's a great segue from like spooky, like paranormal fall books into the winter time in which a lot of us read a shit ton of fantasy. Next up is another absolute favorite of mine that I don't think I've talked about on here too much, and that is Her Soul to Take by Harley LaRue. If you've never read Harley LaRue before, she has a full page of content warnings because this is a dark romance. And the content warnings are to be taken very seriously in her books, like all of her books. I also would say that Harley's books are 18 plus. If you are underage and a minor, please don't read this. Don't even look at it. We're not going to talk about it. This is about a girl who has a YouTube channel. She goes to, I think it's an abandoned church. I know it's an abandoned building, and she performs a ritual thinking it's just going to be fun content for her channel, and she accidentally summons a real demon. And this demon gets involved in sort of the weird shit that's been going on around town. There's a cult involved if you're into cults. Oh, I could probably add this to my cult list. I don't think I have it on there. I need to reread this. I really like this series, and I still need to read the third book that came out this year. Was it this year or was it late last year? I don't remember. I haven't read the third one yet, which is Her Soul of a Witch. But this is dual perspective between, what's her name, Ray and Leon. And it is a romance. This also just got traditionally published more recently, and there's a special edition coming out in the fall, which I'm super excited about. I believe it comes out in November. I have it pre-ordered. And this is still one of my favorite, like, dark romance, spooky covers of all time. I love it so much. But highly recommend if you want a little bit of paranormal, you want to get into dark romance and are prepared to deal with triggers, I do recommend this one. If you've never read dark romance before, I think this was one of my first dark romances I ever read. So I do recommend it as a segue, but please, again, read the triggers. If you have any triggers, even if you don't think you have triggers, please read the triggers, because you might be like, I don't know how I feel about that. But I do recommend this is a 5-star for me. And then we have a book I read this year, and it has been in the running for my top 10, top 15, whatever I'm going to end up doing this year. But that is All Our Hidden Gifts. Yes, I did buy this book solely on the cover because it looks like a tarot card. And this does involve queer representation. If that is the thing that you are looking for, this is definitely, I would consider paranormal. It's about this girl who I believe she goes to a Catholic school. I know it's a religious school. And she discovers that she starts reading tarot for people at school, not thinking that it's a big deal and thinking it's like a fun little magic trick. And then there's this tarot card that appears to one student in the school that doesn't exist in the deck. Then weird things start happening to the person that got the card that isn't supposed to exist. And again, this is a book I read in like one night. I definitely need to reread it to continue on with the series, but I loved this first book. It was one of the first books I had like read with my face in a very long time earlier this year. And I'm excited to read the rest of the trilogy because this was so fun. It's got some very good queer rep. It's definitely spooky, paranormal. Again, tarot, big buzzword of mine, so highly recommend this one if you've never heard of it. Then we have an oldie, which I read these books, oh gosh, like 4 or so years ago, maybe a little bit longer ago. And that the first book being Stormfront, and that is the Dresden Files. I believe the first one's Stormfront. It's been a couple of years. If you want a really long paranormal series that you just want to sink your teeth into for the entirety of the fall season and maybe even into winter, depending on how fast you read, I highly recommend the Dresden Files. I know that super long series are not everybody's favorite, and they often aren't mine, but when they're more episodic like this with an underlying like things like romance throughout, I definitely enjoy the hell out of it. This and Criminal Intentions are two of my favorite, like really, really, really long series. I think there's 13, 14 of these out. It's been a minute since another one came out. I don't own these because I want to eventually own all of the mass market paperbacks of them. and they're really hard to find for me to collect for some reason. I never see them. I sometimes will see the first one, and then I'll see like the 12th one, and that's it. So I don't own these physically, although I would love to someday. But this is about a paranormal investigator named Harry Dresden, and he literally, I think it's set in Chicago, and he just investigates anything weird or spooky or paranormal or demonic that goes on in the city. He's just up for hire for that reason. He also has this talking skull, which is one of my favorite parts of the series, who like helps him. It's like a Sherlock and Watson type thing, but paranormal. And I binged the hell out of this series a couple years ago, and I feel like it loses steam every few years because Jim Butcher hasn't put out a new one, and then it's all of a sudden picks back up when another book comes out. So highly recommend this series if you like paranormal or want to sink your teeth into paranormal. I will say the first like 2 books of this are not my favorite, but then it takes off around book 3 or 4. So if you're able to get through the first 2, definitely recommend. If you like the TV show Supernatural, highly recommend this. Next up is a random one, but this book has stuck with me through the years that I thought I would mention it, and that is The Deep by Rivers Solomon. This is about a different cultural lens exploration about mermaids. And if you're going to read this book, I highly recommend the audiobook, which is read by Daveed Diggs, who, if you're familiar with Hamilton, Daveed plays Lafayette and Thomas Jefferson in the second act. And I'm a huge fan of Daveed's, which is, I'm not gonna lie, solely the reason I read this book. And his reading of the audiobook is one of my favorite audiobooks in existence. I will say Rivers Solomon's writing is very like poetic and almost like verse-ish. Like it feels like it's told in verse, even though it's technically not. Especially the way Daveed reads it, because he is a rapper. But if you want a weird little mermaid book that's really kind of just dark and creepy and spooky, highly recommend this one. And then we have an old favorite of mine. This was a podcast that I got into back in my Tumblr days when it first existed, because it blew up on Tumblr, at least my side of Tumblr, and that is Welcome to Night Vale. They made books out of these with their own stories, and then they also released a couple books that are like storied, like novelizations of episodes. As someone who doesn't like podcasts and has a hard time keeping up with them, the fact that they came out with books of these with the same vibes as the podcast was one of my favorite things that ever happened. And Night Vale is this weird ass little town in the middle of nowhere. It's like in the middle of the desert, and weird shit starts happening constantly. Like there's stuff like ghosts, there's aliens, there's what else is going on in here? Government conspiracies. One of the big ones is the old woman who lives in the house. There's a lot of shapeshifters. Like any paranormal, weird, creepy conspiracy theory you can think of exists in this town. One of my favorite episodes of the early parts of this podcast was The Glow Cloud, or All Hail the Glow Cloud, or whatever the episode is called. I love this weird sci-fi shit. And so if you just want a bizarre little story, I will say the novels have more of a overlying story to them. So if the podcast is too much for you when it has hundreds and hundreds of episodes, I understand, me too. I highly recommend the novelizations of them because I think they're so fun. And then for another dark romance recommendation, I have The Haunting Adeline duology. This is Haunting Adeline and Hunting Adeline. These books are huge. Again, if you are under the age of 18, don't. Just run far away from these and read them later on in life if you're still interested. How these books are so heavy. I'm putting one of them down. I can't do this. This is, again, please check your triggers. This is by H.D. Carlton. I found out H.D. Carlton, at least, I think she lives in Ohio, or she's from Ohio. I didn't know that until she started going to, like, book events up in, like, northeast, like, further northeast than I am, and I was like, I didn't know she was from here. And this is essentially a stalker romance. This is also one of the most beautiful covers I've ever seen. I just really like the dark, spooky covers when it comes to dark romance. And I feel like I missed out on a lot of my dark romance, like, reading, because I wasn't making booktube videos at the time that I read the majority of it. This is one of my favorites. Like everyone else, it is a stalker romance. It's about this man who starts stalking her. He, like, unalives people to, like, get her attention. He, like, leaves a box of hands on the doorstep at some point. And then once you get through, like, the first half of this book and realize the actual storyline besides the stalker part, I feel like it gets a lot more fun. I will say the second book is, in my opinion, so much darker than the first book. Like, please, even if you don't check your triggers on this first one, please read the triggers for the second one, because it is very, very, very dark and deals with a lot of super serious topics. I do think if you are a dark romance reader or want to get into dark romance, this was one of the first ones I read because, like everybody else, it's recommended everywhere, and I understand. It's a great duology. It's a time commitment if you don't read very fast. And H.D. Carlton's writing, quite good, in my opinion. I have two more. The second to last one is Hearts in Darkness. This is also a duology, so I grabbed the second book. And the reason I picked this one for my fall recs, even though this first one I don't think takes place necessarily in fall, but the second one in the duology does, and these are very, very short novellas. You could easily read both of these very quickly. But the reason I picked these for my fall recs is because the second one has a whole like chunk of it that takes place on Thanksgiving, and I feel like Thanksgiving is an underrepresented thing in romances. I feel like there's not a lot of Thanksgiving. There's a lot of Christmas. There's a lot of October, like Halloween themes. Thanksgiving is one that I don't see as much, and also this one made me sob my eyeballs out. I don't really know why. It might have just been my mood at the time that I read this, but I really, really loved the Thanksgiving scene in this, and so it has always stuck as a fall book in my brain. I also realized I didn't say what these are about. This is about a girl and a guy who get trapped in an elevator for like, I think it's like 12 hours. It's a long time that they're trapped in this elevator, and they can't see each other. They didn't look at each other before the elevator went down, and so they are stuck in the pitch black darkness for hours waiting to be rescued, and they fall in love in this process. And the second book is the continuation of that, of can they make this relationship work, and it involves a very, very good Thanksgiving scene with her family and their families and everything. I highly recommend these. I love them. I've never really seen anybody talk about Laura Kay. I've read quite a few of her novella series. I have quite a few of them over here behind Blakey, but I really like her books, and I feel like more people should read them. And then last, I have Cold Hearted, which this book was pitched as if you were Team Jacob, which I personally don't know anybody who was Team Jacob besides maybe Taylor Lautner specifically in the movies. But this is a werewolf romance set in Alaska, and then the reason I read the series is because the second book, which is Hot Blooded, the first one is Cold Hearted. Hot Blooded is pitched as if you were Team Carlisle, if you wanted a romance with Carlisle Cullen from Twilight. I loved the second one. The second one was my favorite of this, and I think there are a couple more books in the series that I never got to, or at least haven't got to yet. If you're feeling the Twilight vibes, which we all know is peak fall season, hoa season, as we keep saying all over the internet. I can't talk. Hoa season all over the internet. But if you are looking for the Twilight vibes and you want some short little werewolf vampire romances set in Alaska, highly recommend these. But yeah, those are all of my fall recommendations, especially for those of you who are not the horror reader that I am. But I hope you all enjoy these. If you've read any of these, please let me know in the comments down below. Thank you all for watching, and I will see all of you guys next time. Did I forget to film this entire video without my mic? Yes. I'm going to try to fix that in editing. Also, yes. Please someone remind me to wear this mic. I never remember.